Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we conclude the Hazards of the Old Ones with Chapter 27, Part 2 in Elysium and the Epilogue. And once again, I have to apologize for the lateness of this video because my wife gave me the goof for Christmas. She denies it, but I'm like, who else? Who else infected me with this scourge? It could be nobody but you. And I've been struggling with this. It's really, up to this point, been nothing more than a mild cold, except for the first day that I was really symptomatic with the cold. I was like delirious. I had a fever, and I had those funky ass dreams, those fever dreams that, now that they're over and done with, were kind of an interesting experience. But I had a dream that my wife was leaning down over me, and when I looked up, she looked like Loeb. If you have ever seen Loeb, that AI cryptid that's making the rounds, it's kind of, so I was basically seeing demons for a while there. My voice was shit. My voice was total crap. But I think it's recovered enough that we can finish the Hazards of the Old Ones. There's a couple things to take care of and a revelation. And we find out that there are two meanings to the Hazards of the Old Ones. One, it's pretty obvious. It's a place. It's a place in Cana that Kai and Kara Hill went to. And it also means something else, and we will find out what that means. So, before my voice craps out, which I'm sure it will at some point, let's finish the book, and we'll discuss it a little bit more, and then we'll see what we'll be reading next. So, Chapter 27 again in Elysium, and really, League of Elder, you need to be better at editing, find these things before they go into print. Event, Part 3, Chapter 27, Part 2 in Elysium. The place had many names, and meant different things to different people. Some called it Arcadia, a place of sunlit gardens and abundant fruit. Others called it the land of Leal, the garden of Irem, or the happy hunting grounds. Some simply called it heaven. The people there tended vast fields and grew healthy, abundant crops under warm skies that never darkened. To these people, to simply work the fertile lands with their own hands, to watch their crops grow and to harvest them was paradise, was everything they had ever wanted. They were a simple people with simple wants. The house of Bodice, tormented, exterminated, and extinct. But in Elysium they flourished forevermore, safe from the drums and the reaching hands that had haunted them. Safe from all who wished them harm. A large creature with red eyes watched them work from the grove of trees. It sighed and quietly emerged, feeling rather shy. It was a huge elephant, holding in its trunk a large box wrapped in pink and gold paper. The elephant stepped forward and watched the bodice tend the fields. Suddenly it lost heart and turned to go back the way it came. It was afraid. It had power untold, yet it was afraid of the simple people tilling the land. The people in the field saw it and stopped what they were doing. "Mayax!" they said. "Look, it's Mayax!" Mayax the elephant turned to face them. The people had dropped their tools and trotted towards him, all smiles. They surrounded him, patting his strong gray flanks with genuine affection. "Where have you been?" the people asked. "We've missed you." Mayax gave the package to one of the children. "I failed you," he said. "I was punished." He looked at them with his red eyes. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." One of the children opened the box. "Cookies!" they all cried in delight. The bodice took Mayax the elephant, a god, by the trunk and led him into the fields with them. "You did your best, and it wasn't your fault. We looked to you for everything when we should have looked to ourselves. It turned out all right. We've everything we've ever wanted. Join us, Mayax. The only thing we lacked here in paradise was you." Mayax threw his head back in joy and gave a loud trumpet. His eyes changed from red to gray, a demon no more. He picked the children up and gently placed them on his back, as he once did. The people he had failed out of kindness to Bodice had forgiven him, and in the end had gotten what they had so desperately wanted in the first place: peace and good lands to till. In Elysium they bore him away to a celebration that would know no end. A god who had finally found salvation in the people he loved. And with that we conclude Chapter 27, again, Part 2, in Elysium. And we see the Mayax arc is concluded. At the beginning of the book, we learn the tale of Mayax and the Bodice, where he protected them from the demons coming out of the wretched Temple of the Exploding Head, which their land sat over. And I always found it interesting that, in the temple books that come later, one of the big mysteries is, where is this temple located? And in this second book, The Hazards of the Old Ones, I spell out exactly where it is. It's underneath the lands of the House of Bodice in the Hala lands of Cana. There it is. Really no secret, but yeah. So the Bodice all get killed because universal balance swung in the opposite direction, but they all end up in paradise, in Elysium, if you want to call it that, or whatever you choose to call it, a place of eternal joy. That's where they end up. And as Cara Hill requested, the Celestial Arboreum removed all the restraints on Mayax, and he could go once again wherever he wanted to go. And he goes to the Bodice in their reward, in their paradise, to beg their forgiveness. And he finds that they had always forgiven him. They didn't hold him in any malice, and they loved him for what he did, or what he tried to do, and accepted him into their fold where he can rejoice with them forever. We never really see Mayax again. I think we see him for a short period of time at the end of the Temple of the Exploding Head books, but really he has a happy ending after a long time of suffering and guilt. So good for Mayax and good for the Bodice. Everyone gets what they really wanted. So now we have an epilogue to take care of, and it's a couple different scenes that need to tie up the few remaining loose ends of this book, and then we will be done. So let's proceed right now to the epilogue of The Hazards of the Old Ones, before my voice gives way. And so, Davidge said in his office, Lieutenant Verlin and a newly minted Lieutenant Kylos in her brand new fleet uniform, only hours old, sitting across from him. I have decided, after a considerable bit of debate, that you, Lieutenant Verlin, have won the job of first officer aboard the Seeker. Verlin's mouth opened in surprise and relief, and she raised a hand to cover it. Oh, sir, I am honored, and I swear on my house I will not disappoint. Davidge smiled. I am certain you will not. You have stood with this crew, you have fought with them, commanded them, and you have earned it. You have done well. My only regret, Lieutenant, is I will not be here to take advantage of your presence and watch your continued growth. Verlin was shocked. You'll not? Then who? That is a matter for the Admiralty. I will be facing appointment for the captain's chair of the New Faith, a Triumph-class beast just coming off the blocks, and Prost. It's an ungainly leviathan to be sure, but as I have been told, time moves on, and so too it seems must I. Lieutenant, the Seeker is getting old. I can feel it in the wheel. I can hear it in the seams as I prowl the decks. I have taken and taken from this proud ship, and she has always come through. But now, I think it is time for a new direction, a new vision for this grand lady. Perhaps she deserves to take it a bit easier, to bear a proud host to an admiral or two at last. Verlin looked down and didn't disguise her disappointment. Davidge saw it. Why so sad, Lieutenant? You have earned this posting. You have made the Marines proud. Whomever is appointed as the Seeker's new captain, they will have a fine first officer waiting for them. I was hoping to serve under your command, sir. You have been my personal hero for such a long time. I was hoping to impress you. Heroes, Lieutenant, are a dangerous thing. Heroes fail, and they disappoint. If you are wishing to impress me, then you have succeeded a tenfold. You have done yourself, your house, and the Marines proud, and I shall expect you as a guest in my home often, for you shall be invited there as you wish. I will look forward to listening to your continued adventures. In this, you have earned yourself not only an admiring colleague, but a friend as well. You are a great captain, sir. If you are everything I'd hoped you might be, and more, if I excelled, it's because you made it easy to do so. Davidge blushed. That's my job, Lieutenant, to create an environment that is open and inviting, where all are free to be their best. If I'm able to cultivate a situation where my crew is at ease to contribute a thought or offer up a deed, then I have done my job. You have done your job, sir, very well, Verlin said, wiping away a tear. Kylos, triumphant in a number of ways, smiled. Congratulations, Lieutenant. Well done and well earned. Verlin turned to her with unvarnished loathing. Obviously, the issues between them were unresolved. She leaned forward and put her hands to her face. Lieutenant, Lady Verlin, please look at me, Davidge said, placing his hands on her shoulders. Verlin looked at him, red-faced. Lieutenant, I want to share something with you. On our first meeting, you told me something which touched me very deeply. Sir? You had said that you first wanted to serve after witnessing for yourself the aftermath of the Second Battle of Marendra III, that you were one of the few people who really understood how close the League came to falling, and that the costs that battle extracted, and when you saw the blackened ships and empty berths, you felt great sadness and wanted to, in turn, do your part. After seeing all of that, you wanted to serve, knowing that we had helped make safe a fine person such as yourself, and that you, standing there by your telescope, understood and appreciated the magnitude of the effort, the sacrifice. It made it all worth it. I just wanted to share that with you. She took a deep breath and smiled. Sir, if I may be asked, what is to be done with Lieutenant Larson's body? On the moon, myself and my Countess will take the dead man's walk, as is fleet tradition, to Blue Pierce, to the domain of Xenon, with his remains, so that I may tell all there what a fine son they had, and how I was honored to have served with him. Davidge darkened, and then upon bended knee I shall beg their forgiveness for not protecting their son, for not safely bringing him home. Sir, Verlin said, I wish to take that walk with you, not only as a Marine, but as a lady of hobby, a lady who was hopeful for their son. He was a fine gentleman. Davidge bowed to her. Lieutenant, my lady, I would be so honored. Sig emerged through a small hole in the stone and rocks. It was extremely dark, yet she moved easily, able to feel her way without needing light. Behind her, in the hole, a light bobbed. Poe, holding a lantern, came through a moment or two later. The two of them were bodysuited and dirty from crawling through the narrow passages. Sig, as usual, was shoeless. Poe wore treaded climbing boots. "How can you do this without shoes on, Sig?" "Easy. Well, here it is," she said cheerfully. "We'll throw some ideas around for a while, then hit the lanes. How about it?" Poe stood and waved the lantern around. "All right," she said. The room they were in was huge, at least 200 yards long and 100 feet high. "Obviously," Sig said, "we'll need to clear the entryway, and we don't need our guests crawling in here for the party, do we? So, Poe, what do you think? You think Dav will like it?" "I think he'll love it," she said, looking up at the impressive ceiling. "I've lived in this castle for over 200 years, and I never knew this was here. You know more about this old place than I do, by far." Sig sat down on a low Vith pillar and opened her pack. She pulled out 2 sandwiches and handed one to Poe. Poe took it and closely examined the walls. The ancient Vith stonework was breathtaking. The ceiling, too. "It's marvelous," Poe said. "Marvelous. It'll be a grand event, the talk of the League. One thing, though, Sig, Dav hates big League society functions, and he hates surprises, too." "Well, I suppose he's going to have to get over it, isn't he? You're starting to rub off on me, Poe. I'm beginning to like parties and balls and things like that, and why shouldn't I? I've got the most handsome man in the League at my arm. I find that I enjoy all the envious looks that I get, and my bowling average is now over 100 and climbing. Let the ladies chew on that, huh? I suppose I'm turning bluer as time passes. I'm going to present this place to my husband as a gift, and I want the whole League there when I do it." Poe took a bite from her sandwich. "Oh, don't forget, Sig, you promised not to tell Pardock about it. My, she's going to be so mad she didn't get to help in the planning. I can't wait to see the look on her face." "What's Pardock's average again?" "I believe it's 215 to 230. "Wow! Really?" Poe nodded. "Pardock is a heck of a bowler. She does everything well. That's why I want her sitting out the planning of this party. I challenged Pardock to another bowling match, only this time I said in clear tones I didn't think she was woman enough to bowl me naked." Poe laughed. "And what did she say? No, wait, let me guess. She probably didn't care, right?" "Right. Said she'd bowl me shod or unshod, fully clothed or naked. She's a trooper." Sig set her sandwich down and walked up to Poe. "And don't forget, you promised to let Milos be your escort. You promised." Poe looked down at her hands. "Yes, Sig. Yes, I did, but I was hoping to..." "To what?" "To beg out of that promise." Sig reseated herself on the stone platform, her feet dangling. "Why?" Though it was dark, Sig could see Poe was blushing. "Because I've my heart set on someone else escorting me. Please. I love Milos. I cherish him, but as a friend, as a brother. I tried and I tried. I just don't have those sorts of feelings for him. I just don't. I wish that I did, but..." Sig smiled. "So, then, who is the lucky fellow?" "Can't you guess? Is it that Ruthven mechanic? Peter of Ruthven?" Poe held the lantern to her chest. Yes, Peter." "Why him?" Poe thought a moment. "Why, I've no idea, really. My heart quickens when I see him. He inhabits my thoughts and my dreams. It's not like he's any more handsome or interesting or rich than the other League lords I've courted. It's just, I think it's the way he looks at me and how it makes me feel. It's oftentimes not possible to explain in logical detail why one person loves another. Are you falling in love with this fellow, this Peter of Ruthven, Poe?" "Yes, I think so, yes." Sig hopped off the pillar and walked up to Poe, head and shoulders shorter than she. "Are you certain?" "Yes, I am certain." Sig reached up and put her hands on Poe's slender face, her short blonde hair lit up in the lantern light. "So you're telling me that I might one day have a pirate for a brother-in-law?" Poe beamed. "Yes, to go along with my black hat sister-in-law, and how I love them both." Sig finished her sandwich. Then, if Peter makes you happy, who am I to complain? She shook her head. I suppose this means I'm going to have to settle my dispute with that cheap slut, Tori Jane of Wham, since it appears we're going to be seeing more of that bitch around. Poe was alarmed. You're not going to try to kill her, are you, Sig? Well, she deserves it. She really does. But as everyone has told me, that was a different Tori Jane in a different place, and everyone seems to like her. I like her, Poe said. I like her very much. In fact, she was asking if she might be invited to visit from time to time, as she wanted to tutor with me, though I don't know what I could possibly teach her. Poe looked quizzically at Sig. I can invite her, yes? Sig smiled. Sure, Poe, you can invite her to come. It's a big castle. I'm sure her paths won't cross. And I promise I won't kill her, as it seems you and Dav will never forgive me if I did. I'll just have to settle for beating her within an inch of her life once or twice. Well, that's a relief, I think. Sig turned and looked around. Well, so for our dedication party, I was thinking of some sort of fall motif. Fall is mine and Dav's favorite season. Chattering and full of excitement, they tossed ideas around all afternoon in the dark of the great hall. She walked through the crowded streets of the village. It was nearly dusk. It happened to be a relatively warm evening in the far north, and the people were in the mood to celebrate. The lanterns strung across the rooftops were lit up with a soft glow, and the village was set for a party. Kai walked alone, heading away from the center of the village. On the morrow, she was heading home to Tusk and her husband for a few weeks. She was eager to see him. She wanted him to look at her in her fleet uniform. She wanted him to be proud, and she wanted to rest in his arms, husband and wife. There was one bit of business she needed to take care of first before she left. She walked with a purpose. She was headed someplace in particular. She hoped, once she got to where she was going, that she'd have closure. She was wearing her brand new, perfectly tailored fleet uniform. It felt wonderful, the silk shirt, the fine linen pants, and felt coat. If she had a bed, she could have gone to blissful, comfortable sleep in it. The only thing she had to get used to was the large triangle hat. It was a bit heavier than her old marine cap. She marveled at her fleet uniform, taking in the detail, the workmanship. She had never really appreciated the embroidery on a fleet coat before, the symbol of rank, but now she loved it. Her collar was flush with twisting, interlocking ivy. A lieutenant. A fleet commander had eagles mixed into the ivy, and a captain had stars woven in. It all seemed a dream. It didn't feel real. She hoped her short journey this evening might bring it all home. Tweeter sat on her shoulder. She had added as her device a little pocket placed just on the inside lining of her coat on the right side. The front of the pocket read, Tweeter, in twisting silver script. She showed it to him, and nimbly he ducked in and out of it, his little head popping out and looking around. She arrived at a small grocery lit up in white light as the azure evening twilight approached. The store was mostly empty of customers. She walked in and picked up a basket, browsing for this and that. A drone of crowd noise from a sporting event played on the airnet by the counter. The grocer came up from the back of the store, carrying various items to restock his shelves with. He'd had a busy day. He saw her and smiled. "Good evening, Lieutenant," he said brightly, easily able to recognize her rank. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Somebody scored. The crowd reacted. And that's it. That's what she wanted to hear. Once, this grocer had inadvertently broken her heart by calling her Miss. She stood there holding her basket and reveled in being somebody again. A bad dream, truly over. After a moment, she tipped her hat and smiled from ear to ear. "Good evening to you, sir," she said. Now, she can get on with her life. They wound their way through the huge new ship, the smell of fresh materials and framing heavy in the air. Captain Davidge walked arm in arm with his Countess through the corridors. Lieutenant Kylos and a nervous Lord Probert and Lady Branna trailed them. The Countess was regal in her yellow Blanchford gown. Walking behind them, the Duke of Olin, Tori Jane of Wham, the Duke's betrothed, and John of Ruthven toured the ship as the captain's special guests. Tori Jane was lovely in her lavender flower-painted Olin gown. Lady Poe and Peter of Ruthven had also been part of the contingent, but they had disappeared shortly after boarding the ship. Sig and Tori had simply agreed to ignore each other, and that's as deep as the hatchet was to be buried. They could tolerate each other in public, they could even be civil, but that was it. Put them together in a room by themselves, and before long they would be at it again, like angry children, and nobody really wanted to see a countess and a duchess-to-be at such activity. The Countess had her head on a swivel, was taking in everything, every detail. Every so often she stopped to look twice at something, all in attendance anxiously watching her to see if she reacted in a bad way. After all, the last time she was on a Triumph-class ship, she was tortured by the fanatics of Knowles and nearly lost her mind. As Davidge had told Lord Probert, whether this ship flew or not depended wholly on the Countess and her reaction to it. Lord Probert, in debt to her for saving his life, and because she was his friend, had completely redesigned the interior of the ship. It looked a lot like a Straylight. Certainly no bad memories there. "How are you, darling?" Captain Davidge asked frequently. "Fine, love, fine," she quietly responded. Lieutenant Kylos was all smiles, rubbing the sleeves of her lovely new fleet uniform, looking down at her frilly white shirt, black command sash, and holstered gun. Tweeder sat happy on the brim of her blue triangle hat. "Your new fleet uniform scratching you, Kai?" he asked. "Feels like a silk nightgown, Dav. It's great to be in the fleet. It's great to be your first again." He looked down at her holstered Mims pistol, a red one with a little bird engraved into the handle. He smiled. "So, Kai, did you really think you could fool me with this?" "Afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Dav," she said, blushing. "Your SK that you're hiding under a painted cloak. What, did you get Madame Tori Jane to cloak it for you to look like a Mims? Is that what you did?" Tori Jane spoke up from behind. "You can see that, Captain? Wow, you have a hot sight." Kai looked back. "Tattletale." Tori winked at her. "You're gonna have to get rid of that SK, Kai. We use Mims here in the fleet. You know that." Kai, adjusting her hat, was dying for a mirror. "Newsflash for you, Dav. That's a toy gun." "No, it's not." "Yes, it is." He winked at her. "It's glad to have you back." John of Ruthven approached and walked beside Kai. "Lieutenant, I was wanting to apologize to you for my rude behavior upon our initial meeting." "It's okay, Johnny. After all we've been through together, what's the big deal? You deserve better, a better treatment. You're a fine woman, and your husband is a fortunate man." She smiled and looked down at him, Tweeder dropping down to her shoulder. "Listen, Johnny, I'm married. I'm devoted to my husband. It might seem weird since we're rarely together, but I'm devoted to him nonetheless." She leaned down further and whispered into his ear. "But doesn't mean I didn't think about it a little, you know." Johnny laughed. "Hey, when next we meet, can you give me a few seconds head start, since we're friends and all?" "I'll give you a whole country minute. How about that?" She clapped him on the shoulder. As they made their way down the hall, a door opened and out came Peter of Ruthven, looking a little rumpled. He was putting on his duster. He saw the procession coming down the hallway and straightened up. "Captain, Countess, my Duke," he said. "Lord Ruthven," Davidge said. "Where's Lady Poe?" The door opened again, and a thin stream of silver tech came flowing out. The stream found Peter and wrapped around him, stopping at his face, mussing his hair. The end of the stream wandered into his ear. Poe, also a little mussed, came out of the room. "Peter," she said, "I was getting—" "Oh!" She saw everybody looking at her. "Oh, Dav, Sig smiled. "So, Lady Poe, what's going on?" Poe turned a deep shade of crimson. "Oh, nothing, Countess, nothing. We were simply checking the appointments of a random room here on the ship. I wanted Peter to double-check and make sure all the technological accessories were safe for layman's use." "What?" Probert roared. He looked at Poe with a bit of anguished longing for a moment, standing there in his buckle shoes. I assure you, my lady, everything here is safe for use, he said quietly. Milos, my friend, I didn't mean to imply... The Lady Branna elbowed him hard in the ribs. Never mind this old fart, Lady Poe, Branna said. I'll throw him into my dungeon if you wish to quiet him down. Isn't that right, Milos? Probert turned to Branna, small, blue-haired, pretty, his constant foil and intellectual rival. She smiled and touched him on the nose with her finger. And I would love to have you, Milos, she said quietly. Probert blushed and Davidge laughed. Carry on, Lady Poe. They continued past and finally made their way to the captain's quarters, the place where they will both live, should this turn out. They walked in and the Countess looked around. Big, high ceilings, lots of windows. The Prof's shipyards brimming with movement in the steamy afternoon sun. She walked up to one of the walls and stared at it. She stared at it for a while, Davidge walking up beside her. Anything wrong, darling? Yes, she said quietly. They all stood and looked at her. This room is too small for us, she said finally. This wall will have to go. Probert looked around at the huge room. You wish a bigger room, my Countess? Yes, and we will need a proper sitting room to entertain guests. Aboard a starship? Lady Branna asked. Yes, one never knows. And the additional space shall allow me to practice my bowling while aloft in space. Lady Branna shuffled uncomfortably. Bowling, Countess, is certainly a quaint pursuit. Sig smiled. Lady Branna, your average is 164, very respectable. You bowl quite often, and you know it. Branna cleared her throat. Anything else you require? Yes, I do not like the color in here. What do you prefer? Something in a light, soothing blue, right, love? Kai, what do you think? Kai was admiring herself in the mirror, chewing it up. Huh? She walked forward and stood next to Sig. Well, I'd say the color is just fine, but maybe a nice blue might do better. And of course, I'm going to want to decorate it myself. Davidge looked around, not seeing anything wrong with the subtle cream. Well, certainly. So, Countess, will you be fine in this vessel? No bad memories? Sigillus turned to her lord and smiled. Not so long as I have you at my side. Probert made a few notes. So, take out the aft transvert wall and the captain's quarters and repaint in blue. The Lady Branna moved next to Probert, taking her place at his side. Yes, blue. I told you, Milos. A lady always likes a fine shade of blue. Perhaps you'll listen to me next time. You who knows not what a woman wants. Harpy, Probert said under his breath. Old troll, Branna said back. They looked at each other, which Davidge noticed. He smiled. Maybe, just maybe, Probert and the widow, Lady Branna, might know happiness after all. They seemed made for each other. He walked up to Sig and placed his hand on her belly. She was just beginning to show. Suddenly, Sig's eyes bugged out of her head, and she doubled over. Davidge knelt down to her aid at once. Sig, what is it? What's wrong? Our son. He just kicked me. Davidge was shocked. Kicked you? Is that possible? Is he developed enough yet to kick? He was concerned. Should we go to the dispensary at once for... No, love, I'm fine. Our son's fine. I read about elder embryos kicking out, not with their feet, with their minds. It's his gifts. Her eyes bugged out again. Oh, you little Blanchford, you. He's really hitting me. Lady Branna smiled. Oh, my daughter's sorry. Just about beat me to death, as I recall. Too bad she didn't succeed, Probert added, getting a scorching look from Branna. Sig burst into a smile. Davidge put his head gently on her belly. He felt a definite rap from within. That's our son? And Sig nodded. Lord Probert and Lady Branna stepped forward. It's often a sign of good luck to feel a genuine gift kick, Probert said. It's a rare thing indeed. Sig allowed Probert and Branna to touch her belly, and soon they felt it. Sig allowed everyone to have a turn, each getting a little jolt from her belly. He hits hard, Kai said, smiling. He's going to be a real trooper, the Duke said. Tory Jane approached. The two regarded each other with skeptical eyes. Silently, they came to a mutual agreement, and smiling, Tori touched Sig's belly. There's another one, and another. Tori was astounded and laughed with joy. Though these two women would probably never be friends, the matronly side of them could at least agree they were experiencing something special together. The tenure of the new faith was off to a great start. "I did it," the woman said. "Everything that happened is my fault." A handsome young man sat on a checkered cloth under the boughs of a large tree. He had silver eyes that caught the light. Across from him, a slender, green-haired woman in a summer dress sat in a semi-reclined position. She wore a green and black charm at her neck, with a large M etched in the face. They had been enjoying a simple picnic lunch from a basket. She gazed at him, wondering what his reaction might be. "Please go on," he said. After a moment, she looked at her trembling hands and continued. "I was angry for what House Xandar did to Zal 88, and for the knowledge that was lost. I adored those people. I gave them everything I had to give, knowledge, enlightenment, and all my love, and I had to watch them die because the universe turned its back on them, killed by the House of Xandar, and because of them, I fell and had to crawl in that terrible place at the bottom of all things for ages, enduring horror after horror. And then they took my name and twisted it into something despised." She clenched her fists and shook with bitterness. "I wanted revenge." She paused again, looking for a reaction. She received none. He sat there on the cloth with his silver eyes. She felt nervous and awkward. She brought a hand to her mouth, as if she wanted to lick it, but instead put her fingers into her green hair. She continued. "I snuck out of the windage. It's easy to get into that place and terribly hard to get out. It took me a long time, crawling on my belly, but I discovered a way through the scalding pipes, and I brought the others with me. Free, with nothing in my soul but hatred, I turned my rage against the House of Xandar. They turned me into a goddess of destruction, and that's exactly what I was going to become for them. I was going to see them dead." She tucked her legs up under her chest and put her head down. "It's funny," she said, "how there are so many universal rules against preventing a pending tragedy, but there doesn't seem to be any against intentionally creating one. In fact, the universe seems to welcome such a thing, to shut down in one place and start fresh somewhere else. Wrapped up in my malice, I had a free hand. I prodded the black hats prowling in their secret places. I whispered in their ears. I helped them enhance their shadow tech and move against Xandar. I came to Princess Vrock as she dangled on that Bergen hook. I fortified her. I gave them the thought to use her as a hammer against her own people. I thought it was clever and ironic of me to use her." The wind picked up a little and moved through her green hair. "We've become close, you and I. I cherish what we have shared. For the first time in a long while, I actually care for something again. For you. But first, I wanted you to know what I've done. If there's anything that might be cultivated between us in the future, I wanted the air clear." The wind rustled through the branches of the tree. The young man still said nothing, and she continued. "Everything was going as I expected, but then my plot grew and became strange. I watched as the Black Hats prepared to not only destroy the House of Xandar, but the whole planet along with it. And if I'm being honest, I really didn't care. All I cared about was my revenge. Zal 88 was going to happen all over again, and I didn't care." "And then what?" the man asked. "Well, and then there was you," she said quickly, "coming to Xandar's rescue. I think of all the kind like us. Only you could have done what was accomplished there. You have something that few of us still have. You have a heart, just like Mayax, and I thought he was a one of a kind. You still care. Perhaps it's because you're so young. Perhaps the universe hasn't beaten it out of you yet. But regardless," she closed her eyes in fond remembrance. I watched you. I watched you doing all the novel things that you did, choosing your brave warriors and placing them on the board, and then patiently moving them at the correct time. We figured there was no possible way you could succeed. And then I tried to impede your progress a little. I gave Lord Milton the arcane medallion in the pub. He thought I was some robber lord from Planetfall who smelled of catnip. He thought he was being clever and was stealing it, but no. I, in disguise, let him have it, in the hopes he would become an inconvenience for you. I tried to frighten your warriors with warnings and potents. I even tried to place the sisters in front of them. I put the sister who was fond of your Lord Blanchford into fertility early, knowing she would come for him and possibly injure the Countess. And I came at that girl you took into the Hazards. I might have even killed her too, had you not watched over her. She winced. And then I watched the sisters tear you apart, putting your immortal life at risk because you believed in that girl. And look at you now, and look what you mean to me. I should have helped you, but I felt nothing. I just watched. I see that over and over in my thoughts, and I'm so sorry. I had faith in my friend, he said. It never crossed my mind that she would fail. Faith is something I haven't had in a long time. That is truly an elusive thing to have. The woman was done talking. She had said her piece, and they sat in silence. She was embarrassed by her revelation, and crushed by it as well. Taking a saddened breath, she stood and picked up her shoes. She gave him a last look and made to walk away. "Where are you going, Mabs?" he asked. She stopped, still holding her shoes. The Black Hats were going to attack Xandar anyway, whether you whispered in their ear or not. You didn't make them angry. They were already that way. You didn't torment the 11th daughter of the House Xandar. You didn't do anything other than bring the inevitable to pass more quickly. Can it be you fell so far after the tragedy of Zal 88 that you lost every last bit of hope within you, even now? He held his hand out. "Please don't go." She sat back down at the opposite end of the cloth, not looking him in the eye. "Oh, what about your friends? What I did to them?" "I knew it was you, Mabs. It didn't take me long to figure it out. I wanted you to see what good people can do. I wanted you to see that it's easy to have faith. Have you heard from Mayax?" he asked. "I heard he's doing well," she said quietly. "I heard he found redemption. I'm glad for him. He deserves to be happy." "He certainly does. And what of you, Mabs? What will it take to redeem you? To make you happy?" She smiled with her elder face. "I suppose that depends on you, Carahil. Is there enough faith in your heart for one such as me?" The young man rummaged around in the basket and pulled out a tin full of cookies. He offered it to her. She scooted a little nearer to him and took one. "There's plenty of faith in my heart for you, Mabs." She stood there holding her cookie. "You see everything in such an unclouded way. I thought you'd be angry with me. Hate you. And how would that make you feel? Sad? Heartbroken? I don't want you to hate me. I want to see what you see. I want to have faith once again. I want to believe in something, like you do." "Oh, don't be sad. I don't hate you. I care about you too much for that, Mabs." She laughed a little and took a bite from her cookie. "That's what gets us into trouble, I suppose. Caring too much is a hazard we of the old folk must face. Everything withers around us eventually, and I suppose we wither too. Caring, and to be cared for, isn't a hazard. It's a gift, a simple joy that is timeless. Look at that tree. I know somewhere along its length there are those who care for me, and that gives me a place, all my own. There's a place there for you too, with me." The tree they sat next to was huge, universal in size, its branches stretching out to endlessness. Its branches nurtured and enveloped all. The woman moved across the cloth and sat next to him. "It never occurred to me that this might have a happy ending," she said. "Thank you for proving me wrong, and recreating in me something I'd long lost. Sometimes having little faith helps. We deserve a happy ending, too." She leaned her head against his shoulder and took his hand, and together they gazed at the great tree. May all be saved. And with that, we conclude The Hazards of the Old Ones, Book 2, published way back in 2010. Second book in the League of Elder series, one I was still finding my way in with my thoughts as a writer. We see the genesis of how the story would be conducted in future books. A lot of stuff covered here. We had Mayax having a happy ending, getting redeemed and joining the bodice in Elysium, or in the afterlife. We see Lieutenant Verlin getting the first officer's job on the Seeker. Unfortunately for her, Captain Davidge was leaving the Seeker to take up the new faith. And in all the subsequent books where we see Captain Davidge, he is captaining the New Faith, a much larger, much newer ship. Verlin, as I had mentioned earlier, I had big plans for her. I was planning on her for being the love interest of Captain Davidge's unborn son, Lord Cable. It just didn't pan out. They just didn't have any charisma together, no chemistry, nothing. It just didn't. It was just a perfunctory exercise, and she just seemed too stately and too much like a lady to want to hang out with a kid, even though as soon as he gets into his 20s, he's basically caught up with her, however old she is. She's probably in her late 60s or 70s. That's how the aging goes in the League of Elder. It just seemed weird, seemed kind of creepy, and I'm like, no. So I just basically cut her out and came up with Sam to be Kay's love interest. So that was the end of Lieutenant Verlin. Dav and Kai move on to the New Faith, and then we see in the Temple of the Exploding Head books their continued adventures in that much larger, much newer ship. This not done with the Seeker, as the Seeker's adventures continue in the Belmont Saga, which I suppose I'll be reading next. That's a 2-book compilation, the Belmont Saga, Sands of the Solar Empire, which is probably one of my more derisive books. It's told in a very different format. And then Against the Juries, which is one of my favorite books. I just like how it came out. And we've heard a lot about the Seeker affair, as we've seen in the Shadowtech Goddess books. We revisit the Seeker affair, how Lord Belmont had bought the chair of the old venerable ship Seeker, and the adventures that happen after that. Well, we will actually see that in subsequent readings as we go through the Belmont Saga. Fortunately, you won't have to deal with some of the slings and arrows that I had to deal with, because I hate cliffhangers. This book was very big, almost over 200,000 words, and my publisher said, you got to chop Saki this right down the center. And so I had to, there's really no good way to do it. It's basically, I had built up the story, gave Paymaster Stenstrom a bunch of secrets, and then took them all away. But then the story itself kind of sputtered and then got started again, only to end. And I got called out on the carpet for that a little bit. Some people didn't care. Some people did. That's what we'll be reading next. We see Lieutenant Kylos going back to that grocery store that she had visited previously when she got kicked out of or when she quit the Marines and was standing there in a dress. And that grocer calling her miss really had a big effect on her. It's just a personal thing. She equates having rank with being somebody. Growing up as a peasant on Onaris, that means a lot to her. So for her to walk in there in her uniform and for him to acknowledge her as being a lieutenant put some closure to that brief moment of her life. We then see Sig inspecting the brand new Faith, just to make sure that she didn't have any residual bad memories from her first foray in a Triumph class vessel. Book 1, she had been captured by Princess Marlith, and she almost lost her mind as she battled Marlith and her henchmen, the fanatics of Nulls, and she eventually did the Dracula thing and put them all on spikes and about lost her mind. But Probert had sufficiently redesigned the interior of the ship so that it didn't dredge up any bad memories. And then we see Mabs confessing to Carahil at the end of the book that she was the one who kicked off or instigated the whole Xandar thing with the Black Hats and the Shadowtech. Mabs had been a goddess of enlightenment and knowledge for Zal 88, that space station. It gets mentioned every so often. That was over the planet Gothan. And then the House of Xandar shows up and wanting the knowledge and puts everyone to the sword. on Sol 88, and then when they found out they couldn't understand the knowledge that was there, they blew the spaceship up. And Mabs was punished for that. That's what turned her into a demon, and she wanted revenge against the House of Xandar. Like she said, she had been turned into a goddess of destruction, and that's exactly what she was going to be for the House of Xandar. But she and Carahel had become close, and they basically, I wouldn't say they get married, but they are mated to each other. They have 7 children, and we see one of them quite frequently in future books and in past readings. We see Aetha of the Quest, who is their youngest daughter. We also see Lord Probert, who was in love with Lady Poe, but she even says, I love him as a brother, but she didn't have any romantic feelings for him, and instead would eventually marry Peter of Ruthven and have several children, as we see later on. The cousins of Kay, Lady Sarah and Lord Philip, and then Lady Millicent, who's their youngest daughter. And then we see the beginnings of his relationship with Lady Branna of the House of Champion. She had, her husband had died. If you remember when the Seeker blasted off in the early part of the book, Davidge consoles his helmsman, Lady Sari, and Lady Branna is Sari's mother, and he had consoled her that her father had passed away. So Branna was a widow. She eventually marries Lord Probert, Lord Milos of Probert. Even though they were kind of intellectual rivals and always barbing at each other, they make a good couple. And their son, Lord Lon, would be a major character in the Temple of the Exploding Head books. So we see a lot of these character connections starting to form in this one. Again, a fun book, one that's a little rougher than the future books, but it was coming along, and I think it turned out pretty well. So I'm probably going to take a couple weeks off just to get over this coof, and we will take up in a few weeks with the Belmont Saga, which is the first book in that, Sands of the Solar Empire. One of the books I've gotten the most haranguing over as far as critical reviews, but just because of the way I chose to tell the story. Fortunately, in these readings, you have me here to go over some things, make sure things aren't fuzzy or misunderstood, but we will knock that out in a couple weeks. Until then, I bid you farewell, and I hope you had a happy New Year and a holiday season. I hope you didn't get the coup for Christmas like I did. But in any event, be safe, be well, and until next time, peace out.